Cannot hear audio on YouTube. Yes, on now. Okay, cool. So it's working. All right, sweet. Yeah, I can hear it now. All right, cool. All right, well, I will try not to repeat some of the conversation for the sake of YouTube, but I probably will a little bit. But I guess where we're at anyway, from a me perspective, is I'm just trying to balance time between where we are and where we're going, and I really want to try and focus on, I guess, what TuneFlow has to offer and how it's going to make our lives easier and how it's going to automate our lives as well. Really, the next stage for me, from a business perspective, is a lot more development for TuneFlow, mainly because I see a lot of utility there, whether it's helping other tuners out in this industry or whether it's just automating my workflow to make my tuning process more automated and easier for me, which then benefits you guys because you get turnaround times a lot quicker, etc. But a lot of that's not going to happen overnight. There is a bit of a time delay. Obviously, there's also a cost element. You know, I'm not a millionaire, so I can't just go and dump $1 million into this thing and have it up and running tomorrow. So it's just a matter of ensuring that we get the right balance, and we get the right tool set, and we really try and develop a platform that we believe is going to accommodate people. And we don't really intend, at this stage, we have no desire to create a flashing platform. It's a lot of work. In all honesty, to do that, it is a lot of work. And we've been working closely with some of the flashing platforms out there anyway for support on this, and frankly, I'd rather just keep it that way. It's a good working relationship. I can give a good example is MK Flasher. They've been really, really good with us. So, we really don't want to jeopardize that sort of, I guess, working relationship, to go and do our own flashing platform. At this stage, what I care about is being able to automate and make the process of tuning easier, but I also want to try and educate people too on the process, because I feel like a lot of people just sort of think it's this magic wizardry, what tuning is, and specifically tuning on BMWs. I do have some e-learning content that I'm going to push through TuneFlow soon. Just need to find the time to do it. There is already a video on there regarding data logs, which you guys may already remember the old school video I had on data logs. I've made a new one, but it is currently only supplied through TuneFlow. It is not on YouTube. It may go to YouTube in the future, but for the time being, I'm going to dump that into TuneFlow. So, I guess where we stand at this, it's kind of boomy. As in the microphone is boomy, or is it better now? Because I moved my mouth away from the microphone a bit. Guess we'll see. We've got heaps of people replying. Let's see. Yeah, right. I bought a brand new microphone like 2 months ago. It's supposed to be a better microphone than my last one, but apparently I've had a few people make that same comment that it's a bit distorted. Specifically on YouTube. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Where was I? Yeah, so I think really as a whole, like, I'm pretty wiped out, right? If I'm being honest, I'm pretty wiped out. And that's not to say that I'm over it or anything like that. It's just the demand Navardi Tuned requires is at a point where I'm struggling to do that all myself. And the number one priority for me is not just obviously my kids and my family, but it's also myself. I have to look after myself. So I understand that you guys have probably noticed a delay in some replies with revisions and even just responses in the last couple of months. And that's obviously, for those that don't know, there's been a few things that have happened in my life that has affected me. I'm not going to bother going into detail on it, but a massive structure in my life has changed personally, and that has affected me. Now, I've tried to do my best to not let it affect me, but I'm human, so I can't stop everything from affecting me. And yes, I have kids. I have two kids. And yes, I'm almost 26. So yes, I am quite young. Yes, I have had kids young. Yes, I'm doing a lot of things young. So yes, it has been, it's been full on for me, and I'm trying not to let that impact Navardi Tuned, but I know it has to an extent. At the end of the day, I know most people out there probably don't care about that, and they're just like, I paid for my tune, I want this tune, I want it now. And it's like, dude, I get it, but at the end of the day, like, I'm still going to deliver you that product or service. I will. I just need you to be a bit patient with timelines, right? And look, you can go to any other tuner if you want to, but I can guarantee you are not going to get the same level of service that we offer, right? You're really not going to. I've seen it, all right? And I mean, to date, no one has challenged me in the N20 space. I know the B48 sector is a little different because people realize it's not as painful of an engine to begin with. So I know there's a bit more competition coming in that space. But when I started out this company, and when I started out tuning and everything else, the reason why I started Navardi Tuned was really around the whole philosophy of, well, there's products out there in the market, or tuning services out in the market for the N20, and they were all garbage, in my opinion. I had tried a few, they were garbage. The whole experience was garbage, and I stupidly obviously decided to start modifying the N20 and started getting on the forums and offering my advice from my experiences with it, and then everyone saw me as a guru, which is all well and good, but then I was getting an influx of messages, and I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm not getting paid for this. Maybe I should get paid for it. And I was beginning to tune my personal car, and I started learning how to do all that, and trial and error, etc., and I was like, well, maybe I should offer this as a service, because I realized that there was just a massive gap in that market for the N20. And obviously, as time's gone on, I've realized that there's a gap with the B48s, and obviously I know that gap's starting to tighten up quite a lot with the B48s, but I just transferred that same philosophy. And whilst I can do the 6-cylinder engines, to be honest, I don't really enjoy tuning them. The class of customer from the 6-cylinder engines is nowhere near as rewarding and respectful as what I've seen on the 4-cylinder guys. Sorry, I was just reading the chat. It's just not there. I mean, I think one benefit that I've tried to sort of stand out and help foster. Look, I'm not God by any means, and I'm definitely not the be all and end all. But I've tried to foster a supportive and close-knit community for the 4-cylinder engine people, right? I mean, we've got the biggest Facebook group. We've got, I'm pretty sure, the only Discord group for these engines. We've got a open source / public accessible leaderboard website, rather than some random Facebook group that's controlled by a random bunch of people. And I understand that people go, well, but you control the leaderboard. Yeah, okay, but I'm happy to upload everyone's results, including other people's results. And mind you, the current leaderboard result is from a competitor, and I honestly think that number was a pretty impressive number. That's coming from me. I didn't tune the car. I'm not angry about it. I thought, wow, that's impressive. That's good. Sure, do I want to beat the number? Yeah, I'd like to, but if that happens, it happens. Like, it doesn't really faze me. What phases me and what I care about is making sure that I deliver a good product to my customers, and to just generally good services and products and I guess opportunities to the community that doesn't exist currently. And we don't see that in the 6-cylinder gang. It's very cutthroat, tit for tat arguing. And sure, there's some lovely people in there. Like, I've met a lot of lovely people. I'm not saying they're all terrible. It's just, it's a different kettle of fish. It's a kettle of fish I honestly don't really want to touch. I've been contemplating dropping 6-cylinder tuning altogether, because from my experience, the majority of 6-cylinders I've tuned, the customers have been absolutely painful to deal with, and I don't believe it's worth my stress to deal with it. I just can't be bothered to deal with that stress. What's the point? I've had some lovely people, don't get me wrong, I've had some lovely people, but I've had some just absolute people that are really painful to work with. Now, that's a key point too. I work with you guys as a customer and a business relationship. I work with you. I don't work for you. I work with you. Yes, you're paying me money to do a service, but I work with you. And that's important, because at the end of the day, I really do not like doing, I guess, everything that I'm told to do by the customer, unless there's a good reason for it, right? And I'll give you a good example. If the customer tells me I run £24 a boost on an N20, I'll say no. Oh, but that's what I'm telling you to do. No, because it's not safe, particularly if you're running gasoline fuel. But if you came to me and said, hey, look, I might want to run flames, but only if I'm running 98. I might go, yep, that's fine. Or, hey, Harry, I'm going to jump on the track. I want a map that's probably a bit more tailored to the track. Can we change the power band a bit? Yeah, sure, that's fine. I can stage boost differently, etc. Or, hey, Harry, listen, for whatever silly reason, I'm going to a car meet and I want the car to sound like it's got an LS lumpy can in it. Can you make that happen? Yeah, sure, that's fine. But I'm not going to go and I'll give you a recent example. I had someone tell me, can you please just add another pound of boost, another couple of degrees of ignition timing? And it's not as simple as that. I'm not going to do it for a multitude of reasons. Number one, we're already at MBT timing, which if you don't know what that means, it's max brake torque. Basically the maximum amount of torque that the car will generate based on the ignition timing targets you have in the car. We're already at that. We're already at the maximum boost for the efficiency of that turbo on that engine. So I wasn't going to push more. I guess there's a lot of misconceptions of, well, if we just add more boost, do we add more timing? We just make more power. Well, no, not really. You get to a point and then it falls off, right? It's like a big giant hill. You climb it, and then you drop. So I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to just push people away. I'm just trying to be honest and open about, well, no, this is not really going to work. And professionally, if I go and pump 400 pounds of boost into an engine and then it blows up, how does that look on me? Doesn't look great, does it? So I'm all about maintaining a good image as best I can. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, okay? But I really do try to offer as good of a service as I can. And I really do try to work with the community and offer what I can for free. I mean, the wiki, for example, I pay that hosting fee. And that costs me a couple of $100s a month to host that, right? The leaderboard costs me money to host. Like, these are all things I'm paying for, and no one pays me for it. You don't see me here complaining and asking for handouts. Look, you can donate if you want to, but I'm just trying to offer, like, what does any other tuner in this industry offer? Because I don't believe they do. And I know this might come across like it's a bit of a rant video, but I'm just at a point where I need to talk about everything that I've experienced in the 3.5 years or so that we've been operational now. And I just want to work on moving forwards, and hopefully we can all come together as a community. Now, I've obviously haven't talked too much about the B48 stuff and community people, etc. That's obviously getting a bit more competitive. It's getting a bit more hyped up. And a lot of that's down to the fact that engine's, I guess, quite good from factory. I mean, hell, we saw 36 pounds out of Kev's engine on a stock engine. Now, granted that Kev's engine was considered an R&D test engine for his turbos and what we could get out of the platform. We set a pretty impressive stock quarter mile time on that. But in saying that, we still have a plethora of B48 Gen 1s, for example, running 32 pounder boost without any issue at all. Like, it's quite an impressive platform to be able to do that, considering the N20 can't. Granted, there is a caveat here. The N20 still to date doesn't quite have, I guess, the turbo that we are looking for that sort of 400 power plus horse range on the stock internals. But also, we're not going to go and test that on anyone's car, right? We don't do R&D on customers' cars. It's just, period, we don't do that. And it's pretty obvious reasons why. From a tuning perspective, right? Now, look, we might offer parts at a discounted rate to see how they go on fitment and that sort of thing, but we are very careful with the lines that we are crossing when it comes to R&D and how we involve customers, if at all. I've spent, honestly, enough money I could have bought a house to develop the N20 and even the B48 stuff. I even went out and bought a B48 car last year. Right? I've just spent the last 3 weeks pulling the engine out of that damn car to put a turbo in it because that engine, that chassis is just not designed to have turbo swaps done. But to be fair, we are swapping an IM500 to it, which we didn't have a Mini Cooper variant of that available yet. We are looking to make that happen. So there was a bit more modification we had to do, and that's obviously no issue on the turbos front. That is just a limitation of the chassis we have. The turbo naturally on the B48 in the Mini Cooper-esque chassis sits quite close to the chassis rail, so the inlet has to be pretty much deformed to get out of the turbo and up to the intake. Where the diverter valve sits has to be very careful. Now, obviously, most B48 people would know in the BMW proper chassis that they don't have a diverter valve, so we had to put a diverter valve on the compressor housing to make it work. And then the outlet of the turbo is in a slightly different position, so we had to make that work. So there was a lot of mucking around, so it was just easy for us to pull the engine out, put the turbo on, try and fab it up as best we can, make sure it's running right, and the car's currently running. I haven't had much time to actually put the tune together, so I've just got a base map running about 17 pounds of boost. Now that car normally runs 26 factory, and we're making almost factory power on 16, 17 pounds of boost. That obviously says to me that we're going to have a pretty good, I guess, power band out of that car. It feels really lovely, really linear, and that's sure. You miss that initial torque burst that you get out of the factory turbo on that particular car, or even the OEM ones. But the top end feels so much better. It's so worth it, honestly. It is such a worthwhile upgrade as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, rightio. Let me just check up on the chat. Wouldn't spin at all. Was it locked up on the bottom end, or? Okay, that's interesting. I have seen, actually, on that note of not spinning, I have seen that on some B48s, when the pistons break and the conrod is fine, the conrod, obviously having no piston now attached to it, has nowhere to go. So when it comes down and makes contact with the crankshaft and the rest of the engine block, it pushes the crankshaft a smidge that it will contact the balance shaft module in the bottom of the block, and once that balance shaft moves, it will then begin taking off all the tops of the bolts on the rods, and then eventually you have rod caps with one bolt and one stud, effectively. And that typically ends up being the reason why sometimes the balance shaft ends up grenading itself and injecting it out of the engine. But usually it's not the initial cause. In saying that, though, if the balance shaft is not put in properly and has not been centered properly, it will contact the crankshaft / conrods, and then it's basically history from there. Okay. Well, I mean, if you've returned it, I guess you've returned it, but I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to have opened the bottom of the engine up and taken the oil deflector pan off and the oil pump off, and just had a look at the crank and everything from a below perspective to see what possibly could have been causing the contact, if anything. When are we going to get a P48 engine? Honestly, from what I've heard, BMW charges like $300,000+ for one. So, and then there's a bunch of other racing considerations you've got to be a part of to have one. So, it's probably unlikely that we'd ever see one. I guess that's probably my ranty section over. Where we're going, yeah. From what I've heard, Kev, from somebody in Australia who apparently had one. That's apparently what it cost them to get it. So I don't know. It's all just word of mouth. I'm not sure how true that is, but I guess from me going forwards though, like from a Navardi Tuned perspective, if you are talking to someone, it's probably not me. It's probably Kev. We are trying to do everything we can to get at least within that 1 to 3 day turnaround time, business day turnaround time to be specific. We are developing a lot of tune flow, and that's sort of where a majority of our development is now going. The N20 intake manifold and the N20 turbo manifold. The turbo manifold, we've had more success working with Kev and getting Aoplogies to have a turbo manifold and turbo option available. That is coming. As for the intake manifold, we have a very close to complete design, but there's a few things here. One, I still need to test it. I haven't had time to test the most recent design. On top of that, the manufacturing considerations have been an absolute pain, because we've had a few things come back and say, well, for a mold, it's going to be $6,000 US. And okay, sure, I go and pay the $6,000 US, and then we get a product that may not fit properly, or not even fit properly. It fits perfectly fine, but then performs terribly, right? So then I have to go and change the mold again. That's another $6,000 in R&D fees for the mold. Sure, the unit cost might be pretty cheap or whatever, but then I've got to keep going and creating more molds and changing design, and the balloons the cost. And then I have to go, well, I'm going to sell this product to the community. What can I sell it for to get my money back? But what's reasonable for a customer to pay it? right? So I'm trying to basically play, I guess, the slow game. If I can wait a little bit longer and we can get appropriate 3D printing methods, because we have had some 3D printed manifolds come to us for the N20 and we've tested them. It's been pretty alright, but there has been some issues with printing the plenum, for example. We've had some warping occur, so we can't use that plenum. Like, not even, well, we can use it on a development car if it's okay enough, but we can't use it on a customer car, right? So there's been those sort of, I guess, limitations. We've looked at CNC as well. That's an option, and that's definitely, I guess, a more robust option than 3D printing, say, the plenum, but there's a cost element, and then on top of that there's also a volume element and a design element, because how you design a part for 3D printing versus how you design it for CNC is totally different. A few other things that we've had limitations around is like the oil filter housing and how the manifold goes together. There's actually physical part contact in there, so we can't have what we want. And I'm trying to avoid welding where I can, not because we don't want it, it's just we're trying to make it a modular sort of system, so you can change out the length of the runners to get different varying power bands to create a product that, I guess, appeases a variety of use cases, so to speak. But personally, another thing too is I don't really see a benefit of the intake manifold on the market with the current range of turbos. We do not have turbos currently that really seem to push, and that's coming from somebody who has done a few, big external aftermarket turbos. From a bolt-on turbo perspective, they don't push the engine enough to warrant having an intake manifold. You go and spend $1,000, $2,000, whatever you end up pricing this manifold as, and you may get no gains at all, right? So, I mean, obviously we're still testing it, we're still trying to work that out, but arguably from what I've just seen, even from the MILVs perspective, right, if everyone knows what the MILVs are, we just don't believe it's going to be a worthwhile option at this stage. We want to wait till the new turbos and stuff come out. Obviously, if you have an aftermarket turbo, yeah, it's beneficial, but not a lot of people are doing that for obvious reasons. And I say obvious reasons, usually cost. Cost is the biggest reason. Harry, do you think the motor is done? Gold flakes from crankshaft, I assume that's where it's from. Usually gold or silver, etc., is bearings. But usually that comes with rod knock related noises. Although, to be fair, sometimes oil, if it's got zinc in it and all those sort of additives, that can falsely look like there is particulate in the engine oil. I would recommend getting the engine oil tested if you're really that concerned. Rod knock is like the worst noise in the planet, but that's usually an oil flow issue or lack of oil, etc. From an N20, to be honest, from an N20 or B48 perspective, if you're running enough engine load to cause rod knock, you would be grenading the con rod before you grenade the engine and its oiling ability. Latest on cams. Actually, that's a good point, Kev, that you bring that up. So, with regards to cams on the B48 platform, so we had Kelford Cams actually reached out to us. Probably like 3 or 4 months ago now. And they were also reaching out to Lohan Mini, if I'm getting that name correct, out of the UK. And they were basically trying to do feeler test to see whether or not there was interest in the B48 industry to generate cams and create cams for the B48s, right? Now, I jumped in that meeting. Kev also actually attended the meeting with me as well. And we very much tried to say, yeah, definitely there's a massive market for it. And I'm not just trying to say that for them to make camps. Like, I genuinely believe that from everything we've seen. A lot of you guys will know that the B48's factory power curve is usually $5,000 to $6,000, and that's where it sort of peaks around. And then it falls off after that. Now, yes, whilst a lot of that on the Gen 1s particularly, it's turbo related, there is a bit that can be had on a camshaft upgrade, and we've seen what the upgrades Kelford offer for the B58s can do, and we're quite interested to see those same gains on their B48. Not to mention the fact that they also offer a improved high pressure fuel pump cam lobe, right? So you get more volume out of your fuel pump. So yeah, there's definitely traction going there. I did email them 3 weeks ago, and I said because I asked for a cylinder head to go over for development testing, and I said I have one available. They said they're looking at taking that, but probably not for a few months because they've had a few delays with some other development options that they're looking at doing first. So the B48 obviously is not the top priority or the next priority. It's in the line of priorities, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. But it is happening in the next, say, 12 months. So I would definitely be eager to stay in the B48 platform because of that massive development. Once the CAM options come out for the B48, it's going to be a great time, particularly for those that may even not want a turbo upgrade, they just want a cam upgrade. Considering we've seen 30 to 40 wheel horsepower gains without a tune alone on a cam upgrade on some of the B58 cars. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that goes. Let me just catch up on the chat here because I can't multitask. I honestly would suggest Holland having the oil tested. I mean, the thing is that you're asking if the motor is done, but you've got no noises from the motor. The car runs great. Do a compression test on the engine. If that comes back with all cylinders within 5% of each other, well, technically it's 10%, but whatever, in that 5 to 10% range, then it should be fine. You can do a leak down test as well. As long as the leak down is under 10%, you're fine. If it looks like bearing material is in that oil, which an oil test will tell you, then you can at least get an idea that your bearings are starting to hate life. And that can also come down to a few things. Could be a timing chain, oil pump chain issue if it's an N20. It could be the wrong type of oil being used. It could be a variety of things. It could just be a defective engine, for example. It's really rare to see rod bearing or crank bearing problems on the N20 or the B48 anyway. And replacing bearings is not just like, I'm going to replace bearings. If you're going to replace bearings, you should be checking clearances, because you get the clearance wrong and you're not going to have a fun time putting that engine back together, I can tell you now. Oh, it's an N55. Okay, well, if it's an N55, I know the early gen N55s had some rod bearing issues, but it was pretty far and few. It's not, you don't have an S85, etc., so I wouldn't be super concerned. S65, etc., so wouldn't be super concerned, but early N55s had some varying of issues. But yeah, do the things I just suggested. That's the best way to check if an engine, without pulling it apart, is at least okay. But usually rod knock happens pretty quick. Like there's no forgiveness in how quickly that happens. I've had it happen to me once after a 1/4 gear pull. It was almost immediate. As soon as I got off the pull, you could hear it. And it turned out there was some rubbish in the oil pan that had gotten in the pickup and blocked the pickup from functioning properly. So, not ideal. Any idea what a cam plus an IM450 full 85 would possibly look like? Well, I mean, if we're going off what the B58s have seen, what we've seen on the IM450, I would say at least a 30 to 40 horsepower increase in power. So we could be looking at 450 to 470 on ethanol on E85. But honestly, this is all guesstimating. This is the thing, is that I know people like numbers, and numbers are cool, but we don't have the data, so I can't give you a definite answer at this point. I mean, we will have some more IM500 numbers soon. We were on the dyno recently, and we have some stuff, and it was a pretty damn good number. But I'm not going to let that information out yet, because we want to finalize everything before we present it. It's just a part of me being perfectionist and making sure that everything is right, particularly with some of the drama we've seen lately. I'd rather just have something out there that people aren't going to nitpick. To be honest, they're probably going to nitpick it anyway because they've got nothing better to do, but it is what it is. Random question, Holland. Are you tuned by me or are you tuned by someone else? Have you changed your injectors? Actually, that's probably one thing you should probably look at doing, is replacing your injectors. Yeah, updates on the B58 coils. Yes, I have an update. The brackets were done months ago. The N63 T3 coils fit and work. The thing that we have been waiting at B48 coils, whatever. Just BXX coils. Specifically why I mentioned N63 T3 coils is because the boots are longer on those coils than the B48, 58 coils. Everything is ready to go except for the wiring harness. That has been the one thing that we have been waiting forever on to get delivered, because we've had to, it turns out there's actually no off-the-shelf parts for that harness, for the OEM N20, N55, S55 wiring harness coil connector. So we've had to make our own, just like how Precision Race works and Nexus, etc. They all make their own connector. So we've had to make our own connector, so we're waiting on a batch. The first batch wasn't quite great. So we had another batch come through. We're about to start testing them. So the idea of this is that so that people aren't cutting their factory harness to make it fit, because you can buy the B48, 58, etc. coil male plugs, but then if you want to just use those, you have to cut the factory wiring harness and pin them up, which we don't really want to do. That's not super clean and makes it hard for you to go back to stock if you ever have to. From a tune perspective, yes, you have to change the dwell times in the tune, but it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. I mean, to be honest, and I'm trying to be careful here, ask your tuner. Usually when you go to another tuner for advice, whilst that's not a bad thing, it's just sometimes, from what I've seen, some customers use tuner A's advice to go back to tuner B, and then tuner B gets the shits and either has a go at the customer or messages tuner A and has a go at the tuner A. And I just don't want to be involved in any drama. But talk to your tuner. I would suggest probably looking at injectors just based on what you've sent me, but do the other things I suggested too. Also, it's this is like what, the third or second N55 person I have in this channel. It's good to see that you guys grew up and bought 2 more cylinders. But anyway, Kev, mate, you've been awfully quiet. Is there anything you want to jump in on and talk about?
No, I'm good.
All right, sounds good. Has anyone got any questions, I guess, while we're here? Invite to speak. Yeah, I guess we can invite you to speak. Why not? Hit the invite button. Hello. All right, it's muted all the names, so I actually don't know who is talking because I got stream mode on.
I think my boot mod account is a Poobadoob1 or something like that. I'm the one having the weird high pressure fuel pump cuts. I'm trying to figure out what's causing that.
I need to open your tune request so I can actually understand what's going on.
I installed the stage 1, Kev's stage 1 high pressure.
Oh, okay. You were the one that previously came from somebody else, weren't you?
Yeah. I'm having
okay.
issues with that tuner. I've had about $2,000 in maintenance issues. Okay. Yes. All right. Let me just
provide you some live tuning.
Yeah, but provide some live tuning here at Navardi Tuned, where we're just going to tune live. You can steal all my settings, everyone on the internet. Understand how I tune. Let's go. Okay, so with your pump, we've already put the Dorch settings in. That's the one thing that I think Kev was telling me is that does the car apparently run okay on the other tunes with that Dorch setting enabled, or similar pump settings?
It runs like absolute trash until it warms up for probably like 15 minutes, and then after that it's pretty alright, but it randomly bogs down once it hits boost.
When was the valve cover last changed?
It only has 20,000 miles on it, so never as of now.
I mean, it shouldn't be faulty, but I'm just wondering if you have a PCV issue or a mass airflow issue. If you unplug the mass airflow sensor, does it change at all? Or because it was a pump setting problem, usually what happens is that the pump itself won't actuate. So when you go to turn the car on, it'll either do one of two things: run on low pressure fuel feed, which by design is the backup method, or it will throw a bunch of error codes and won't start the car. If it's not doing either of those things, then we can eliminate settings as being the problem. And from my tune's perspective anyway, I have no need to put the pump settings in if we're going to use the drop-down menu, right? You've got Spool, Dorch, I think even the BMS ones are in there. Like, they're all virtually the same pump anyway. So they all work. We've got custom settings ourselves that we can apply in if we need to.
And you said to go with the Dorch Stage 1...
You can use any of them, right? So the reason why I mentioned Dorch was just an opportunity for us to test to see if it was a setting problem. I can go pump in our own custom settings we have for the pump, but the sensors are all the same. So the voltage used, the amperage used, etc., that's all the same. What changes between settings is the duty cycle control, like the PWM control, etc. Yeah. And that's just basically how we refine how the pressure behaves. So does it hold the pressure or does it fluctuate? Right? If you get the PID control really good, then you don't get any fluctuation. You get a nice, smooth the actual pressure follows target pressure, basically, is what I'm saying.
And it seems to be falling off pretty consistently, like, what, 2,500 or 2,200 or something?
Yeah, it's almost like it's immediately dying off.
Oh, weird.
Considering I haven't seen this issue before on these pumps anyway, it's hard to say that it would be the pump. I've seen a similar issue recently with the B58TU pump, but I'm pretty certain they've put that pump in back to front, which is why they've had issues with more than just one pump now.
What do you mean back to front?
Inlet to outlet, outlet to inlet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on an N20 to be
I had a hard
specific.
time. Yeah, I installed it backwards at first. I didn't actually put the fuel lines in, but I definitely did it wrong like 3 times, and then finally figured it out. Is there any chance that it could be an issue with the sensor on it? I doubt it, right?
It's possible, but the only way really to test that is to have another sensor put on the thing, and that's the best thing about those pumps is that you can exchange the sensors pretty easily without having to obviously swap out the whole pump. But I think that the thing really is at this point is that if you ran the stock tune, right, and if you run the stock tune with a stock pump, does the car run fine? If you run the stock tune with this pump and the pump settings, is there a problem? Because that would then point to the pump being the problem. But if it's fine in that scenario, then your next stage is either is it a tune setting or is there another issue with the car, right? That's what I'd be looking at. If you're still getting the same issue on the stock pump, stock tune, or even this pump and the stock tune, it starts to at least give you a bit more of a direction on where to go. I guess the hard part is, and this is not so much on you or anything, it's just from my perspective, usually when I tune customers' cars that have come from other tuners, and it's been other tuners that they've had problems with, there's usually a problem with that engine now because of it. And I'm not trying to point fingers, it's just from my experience, I've seen it happen.
No, I've had I actually tuned with that guy specifically because my neighbor has an N20 tuned with him and he had similar issues. But I did replace the injectors, got a compression test, it was fine.
Okay. Did you get a leak down test on?
A what?
A leak down test. So a leak down test is sort of like a reverse compression test, and really the purpose of a leak down test is to see how much pressure in the chamber is being lost between the piston rings over a period of time, right? It's a little bit more comprehensive than a compression test. And the only reason why I say that is just because sometimes a compression test can hide problems, and I can give you a perfect example of when both a compression test and a leak down test hit a problem. We had an N20. We had an issue with it consuming oil, particularly in one cylinder. And we did a compression test on it, it was beautiful. We did a leak down test on it, it was beautiful. It wasn't until we tore the engine apart that at about 100 mil down the cylinder, there was a tooth out groove in the cylinder, right? Everywhere else was fine, but there was a tooth out groove, and that groove was from the piston as it was coming down the cylinder and was rotating to come back up. The piston was moving and was machining a groove into the cylinder, and as a result the pistons lost all compression at that point. And whilst we leak down test at the top, middle and bottom, we didn't leak down test at this particular 100 mil percentage or point in the sleeve. So we missed that. That would have been picked up in a leak down test, but we missed it. And it wasn't until we pulled it apart and we seen it and we're like, what the hell? And we had to look more, and there was a bit of play in the wrist pin on the piston and rod bushing and everything, and we're just like, okay, well, this probably explains it. It also looked like there may have been an issue with the oil squirter in that cylinder as well. So there was a few mechanical problems, but I was just trying to give an example of, sometimes those tests aren't always conclusive.
I imagine though, if I had like an issue with a specific cylinder, then that specific cylinder, show us having issues.
Yes and no. Are you consuming oil? If you're not, well then probably fine.
Yeah, and I'm not burning oil or anything.
Yeah, that example I gave then is pretty niche, to be honest, because we had never seen it before. So I wouldn't be super concerned it's the case with you. But if you're not consuming oil, you don't seem to have any weird stuff coming out of your exhaust pipe, like white smoke, blue smoke, anything like that.
Nothing.
If it's compressing fine, leak down test is fine, you have no weird knocking noises like rod knock, there's no massive contaminants in your oil, it's probably fine, the engine's probably fine. So then we need to look at like the parts that are bolted to the engine. Pardon me.
Yeah, I think it could be the pump. I don't know if Kevin told you, but when it got shipped, what was it, UPS or USPS, whatever it was, they beat the crap out of the package. And when I was installing it, the where the two wires have, you know, that little like rubber groove thing that they're just like pressed into the sensor housing.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they came out, and I kind of just eyeballed it and put them in, but I'm not sure if I put them in the correct polarity. I'm not sure if that. But then I feel like it would throw a code or something, because then the sensor just wouldn't respond.
I mean, it's PWM.
If the wiring harness isn't working, I think you would have bigger problems, because it would just probably just drop out and come back in. But since you're having consistent issues, I think it possibly is the pump potion. In that case, I could just send you another one. But obviously, we need to like, make sure that it is.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I haven't flushed the new revision yet, so I could go do that right now.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing that I know from a customer perspective is probably annoying. It's like, well, it's probably the pump. I just want to send the pump back. But from like our perspectives, right, we want to make sure it is the pump, because like there's a cost element for us. Well, it's time, but it's also a cost thing, right? I had one guy tell me that he's got a defective TU pump the other day, and he's like, I want to return it. I'm like, well, I'm happy to replace it if it is genuinely faulty, but I need to make sure it's faulty first. Like, because it's money, you know, and like, sure, we might get. Yeah, exactly. The TU pumps are very rarely do they fail, but like, sure, we might get warranty from the place we bought the pump from if the place actually honours the warranty and doesn't mean a pain in the ass to us. But it's the shipping, right? Particularly if we're shipping back to Australia, or if we're shipping anywhere in the world, there's a shipping element. There may even be a reverse importation fee depending on the price of the part, for example. Like, for example, the one of the engines we shipped, right? It came back to us. We shipped it to the US. It came back to us because customs in the US denied the reasoning that the customer had stated on the shipping form for us to put in there. So they denied that, and they took too long to actually liaise with the customer. It hit the 10-day turnaround time window. Customs shipped it back to us, right? Charged us a reverse importation fee for the engine, and then we had to immediately, the day we got it, we then reorganized it to be reshipped, and we had to rechange the customs information. Thankfully, the second time, customs in the US accepted what was on there versus the first time, and it's now with the customer. But that's just an example of like, that was $3,000 in costs that we had to front because of a customs error.
Customs here, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah, so like shit happens.
You guys still like built engines?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's definitely getting to the point where I'm getting a bit sick of the stress of it, because the timelines of these engines is just ridiculous. And I'm not trying to, I guess, hate on the people we have involved in the process. It's just the process it just takes too long. Like,
that's time consuming.
It is. And a lot of people come to me like, oh, but you know, I can get an engine built in like 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and I just tell them, honestly, you won't. And if you are going to get one, it's not going to be to the right quality, right? I know that our N20 engines take 12-ish plus months to be built, and I understand that is shit, right? I know I've got one customer right now, Josh, in the Discord server. He's waiting for his engine, and I know he wants updates, and I want to give him updates, but it's just been nothing but a painful painful process to get, I guess, just progress happening. Whether it's like, for example, we had CNC delays because our CNC guy had a bunch of personal family things that he had to go do, right? Some of his family members passed away, and I can't expect him to go and work. Like, if he needs to take time to grieve, he's got to take time to grieve, and I know that's crap because it's obviously delaying projects, but I'm also a human being. I'm not some sort of a robot that's going to just be like, no, you've got to come back to work tomorrow and get this shit done. Like, so we were out nearly, I think it was close to 2 months, right, just to have a engine block CNC'd for sleeves. We then had to, in this particular case, we had to modify the sleeves because they were our original first generation sleeve designs, and they had basically too much material in the sleeve design, so we had to remove some material to make it fit in the engine block. Obviously, all the new sleeves that we order, they're all part of the new design process, so they don't have that problem. But we had to have those machined. We then had to have the cylinder head ported. There's just so many things, and we're not the only customer either for any of our partnered shops that we work with for this stuff. You know, sure, we might have a good working relationship, and that may allow us to be, I guess, a bit more above some other customers in the line of things, but ultimately we're not a priority and we're not a favorite. So it just takes time, and you know, to make people feel a little bit better, my engine hasn't even been assembled yet because I just haven't been able to get it through through the process. You know, I mean, for example, it sat on the bench for 6 weeks waiting to be honed because we just didn't have availability in the guy that was doing the honing on the block to be able to do it in that time period. So it just sat there, and it was annoying, but I can't change that. So, you know, building a B48, for example, we have contemplated it a fair bit, but from my point of view, the reason why I don't want to do it is just because I'm already having a high amount of delays with the N20s. I don't really want to be adding more and more work to their plate and then having everything then stretch out further because we've just added more work to them.
Plus, I mean, you guys are doing almost everything to the B48 platform, like bespoke from you guys, right? I mean, there's not many other companies doing stuff.
No,
Specific.
I don't think so. Like, I have wondered in the last couple of months if, you know, we are falling behind the curve a little bit in some areas, and that I would like to pick up on. But I guess the thing is, too, is I still haven't seen anything offered. I mean, I know, right, that there is a company in another country that I'm going to avoid referencing because they have just made an absolute shit show campaign online, and that's been a massive amount of unnecessary stress that any of us have needed. And I know that they're doing some pretty good numbers and they're doing some good work. Like, I'm not going to hate on the fact that they have world records, okay? They have done an impressive job setting world records, and that is totally fine. But they haven't offered anything back to the community either. So it's sort of like, at this point, I am still, I guess, the leader in terms of development and what I'm offering to the community. I might not be the world record holder, but does that matter? I don't know. Like, what I care about more as a business and as me personally is what can I offer the community to grow the community? Because I guess what I want is the B48 and the N20 community to be this big, happy family that we all get along. We go to car meets. We love everyone's cars. You know, that's a cool build. I like what you've done here. I like what you've done there. You know, that's what I want. I don't want, wow, you're shit, you can't have the B48 world record. You're crap. You have shit dynographs. You have shit tunes. You don't know how to do boost control. Oh, like, I just, we don't need it. No one needs that sort of drama, right? Like, there's a lot of drama in the tuning industry, and that's sort of why I started off today's chat with a bit of a rant, I guess, was just a lot of it takes a toll on me. And it's not that I can't handle it. I can handle you know, an amount of it. I can't handle all of it, which is why I sort of step back a bit when it does happen, and I go a bit quiet in whether it's Discord, Facebook groups, etc. Because I just need a break from it. The tuning industry as a whole is a few things, right? It's very cutthroat. There's a high amount of theft. There's a high amount of competition. The margins of profit on a lot of it is very, very, very slim, unless you're looking at maybe a tune, for example. Normally profit margins are high, but like I said earlier in today's conversation, if I start spending more and more time on your projects and I don't charge you more for it, I end up making virtually no profit on that at all, right? And I would even argue that profit is such an abstract term for me because with how my business is structured, I am the company, right? Harry is the company. So any income that I get from the business, it's taxed. Then there's monthly bills, like whether it's like bookkeeping bills, website hosting fees, like there's all those bills, all those fees, etc. And then whatever is left over at the end of it is what I get as a paycheck, and then it's taxed again. So it's just like, do I charge more for my tuning services? Well, I could, but then I'm also trying not to damage the community that I have and the working relationship I have with clients, right? I'm trying to not damage that, but at the same time, I've got to be realistic and pragmatic about it that, well, shit doesn't grow on trees, and, you know, hosting my websites isn't free. I mean, hell, we had to pull, I'll give you a great example, we had to pull the backend of TuneFlow out of Azure because with just tune revisions, right? 500 megabytes of tune revision transfer in 1 month cost me $800 in just data transfer fees, right? That doesn't include the fact that I have a e-learning video on there. It doesn't include the fact that, like, it just costs money to host as well. Like, and I was like, that's with like 3 customers at this point in time. This was early days for the tune revision stuff. That was 3 customers. I was like, can you imagine if, like, I have more customers and other tuners that I have on the platform have customers? It just starts to spiral out of control in cost. See it, Kev? So it's what I ended up doing was just pulling it back, and I host that now locally because it doesn't cost me really anything to host it from my own internet. Which is why someone made a comment like, "Oh, the server went down." Yeah, I may have tripped the circuit breaker at home. But anyway, like these are the things that I guess eat into what I can and can't do. That's why sometimes research and development is very limited, and that's why I try and do for TuneFlow, for example. I do a lot of the coding myself because at the end of the day, I guess I'm not really paying myself. It's just my time doing my own thing. I'd love to be paid for it, and I really should be paid for it, but I guess I go, well, if I put all this effort in now, is it going to end up rewarding me later on? It might. If it doesn't, well, it doesn't. But I guess you don't know unless you try these things, and it's all a trial and error. It's a learning process.
That's why that high-pressure fuel pump thing is such a pain, because I've never really seen this issue before. I have no idea what's going on with it.
It could be the pump. Right, I'm not gonna look. These things happen. They can fail. I mean, that exact pump that you have. And for those that don't know, we're referring to the LT4 pump. I think LT1 pump. Sorry. Anyway, so I've had an issue with the O-ring on the sensor seal. It just broke. Right, and it got destroyed by the pressure coming out of the pump, so I had to get a new sensor. I couldn't find the right O-ring to replace because it was a rubber O-ring, and then there was a nylon O-ring behind it. The nylon one, for whatever reason, was what broke, and then the rubber O-ring slid back, and once it slid back, it allowed the pressure to escape through the gap, and it just tore the O-ring to shreds.
I don't see. I popped the hood while it was idling just to see if I could find anything. It wasn't leaking. There's nothing. I mean, audibly coming from besides kind of like a loud tick. But I mean, that's pretty standard. Yeah,
they're pretty noisy pumps, to be honest.
But yeah, I'm not sure. If anything, I'm gonna go flash it right now. I think. Would there be any chance? Because it still does the weird fuel cut even in park. If I just rev it to 2K, so. Should I just try that before I actually take it out on the street?
Yeah, I probably would. If it's doing that, well, then that just saves you a drive, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I live across the street from a middle school, so there's always law enforcement right there.
Yeah, no, probably avoid that.
Yeah. So are there any specific settings I should be... I have it set to Dorch old calibration now, and then everything is basically just OEM besides the speed limiter.
To be honest, I mean, even if you set it to the spool settings, like I said, the physical amperage and voltage settings are the same across all those providers because they're all basically the same pump. Spool does modify their pumps a bit versus Dorch, which is pretty much just off-the-shelf pumps from the manufacturer. Same with the BMS ones as well, etc. So they're all virtually the same. Obviously, what does change is the surrounding stuff that comes with it, right? So the support from the manufacturer, the fuel line, for example, the mounting plate to the car, they're all different, right? That's what really variates on these pumps, etc. And that's another thing, I guess, too, that I might just jump into as a sideline is just when a customer or people in the community go, I can get this cheaper from the manufacturer, right? And I'll use a turbo as an example, versus going to company A and buying their turbo for $3,000 instead of going to China and buying it from the manufacturer for $1,500. I've just saved myself $1,500. You know, I'm getting ripped off if I go to company A. It's like, well, actually, it's a bit more than that. Number one, they're covering the shipping freight from the manufacturer. They're covering the import fee from the manufacturer. They're covering the support for the product. And then they're making their own additions to the product where they believe the manufacturer may not be good enough to do themselves, whether it's in-country or just based on what they can provide locally, right? And then, yes, there is a profit margin, okay, on top of that. Everyone's going to have a profit margin somewhere. But a lot of people don't see any of that, and they just go, well, I can buy it cheaper here, I buy it. And then lo and behold, they buy it, and then there's an issue, and they go messaging the other company about the issue, and the other company's like, well, you didn't buy from me. Like, I'm not wasting my time on you because you didn't pay me. And I know that might sound really shit to say, but that's just the reality of it. But we're not free. I'm not free. Today is a Sunday. I don't work weekends, and I'm here. But I'm here today because I'm hoping to talk to you guys. Yeah, it is. It's I'm gonna go out for breakfast soon with my kids and have a nice relaxing day. But I guess, yeah, look, you can try any of those settings. What really differentiates on those settings is the PID control, so how that pressure stays on target.
Okay. And you said, I guess, just go with the old calibration?
Yeah, any of them. To be honest, if they all have the same issue, then we might be looking at the pump as the problem.
Okay.
Or I guess on that note, I'm going to jump to the chat quickly too while I see all these messages. Roman, don't stress, mate. We're okay with your car being a bit of a project because it's got a very unique setup on it. So it's fine. It's okay. I'm not having a go at some people. I'm having a go at, I guess, just the general things that I see in the wider community as I've been in this space for the last 3.5 years. Also, I'm gonna assume, I can't even see who this name is, but the conversation about the E85 OTS map on the B46. How often do you recommend running a tank of 93? I don't see anything about it in the wiki. Yeah, the reason why there's no information in the wiki around that is because usually the problem with ethanol is if you let it sit for about 3 or so months, it begins to separate from the gasoline that's in there, and you don't want that. If you're running it regularly, it's usually fine provided the fuel system can support it. Now, what does happen when you run ethanol consistently is your catch can will fill up with usually condensation or water more frequently, so it's best to check that. It can dilute your oil a bit, so you're best to have your oil service intervals reduced. Pardon me. Usually you halve it over what you would run on gasoline. Usually we don't see an issue with injectors, etc. But if you wanted to be on the safe side, I would happily suggest maybe once every 2 weeks, which is pretty low on the scale. And some people will say once every 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. We've got cars in Australia, for example, that will run ethanol 24/7. But yeah, I'd say once every 2 weeks, just run a tank of 93 through it. I mean, hell, from a fuel economy perspective, it is quite hard to run ethanol all the time anyway. It's not fuel efficient at all. And then the cost can vary too. So in Australia, it's actually more expensive for me to buy E85 now since the pandemic than before the pandemic because ethanol is heavily used in sanitizer, all those medical stuff. So there's a massive demand for it. As a result, ethanol has gone up in price. It's now more expensive than 98 RON for me. It used to be well cheaper, which would make sense because you'd get less mileage out of the fuel. And now I pay higher price to get less mileage. It's actually just not cost effective for me to run it. Yeah, sucks. I know some people have had to jump off. I'm going to jump off shortly too. Have you heard anything about problems with flywheels and auto B48s? No, I haven't. None at all. Especially hybrids. No, your flywheel is the same as the non-hybrid engines. What's different between B48s in regards to automatic flywheels is the Mini Cooper flywheels are actually slightly smaller than the BMW specific chassis. Must take my local BMW shop has changed a few on F30 now and first time on G30. Oh, stock trans neighbor. Look, I have never heard of an issue. There might be a real small localized amount of issues, whether it's from a small production batch issue or it's just the numbers are so small in general that we haven't heard about them, but to my knowledge, we've never had an issue with them. Something with the springs, the suspension, the flywheel getting worn out, symptoms, pulsating, vibration, shaking when turned off. Yeah, I don't know, mate. To be honest, I've never heard of it, in all honesty. Very strange. If anyone wants to jump into the voice chat quickly, I can let you in and we can have a chat. I'm probably going to try and get off in the next 15 minutes at least.
Alright, I'm going to go flash that revision, see if anything changes.
No worries, mate. Good luck.
Alright. Oh, wait, I did have one last question, actually.
What's up?
So, hypothetically, if I wanted to be the classic clapped 3-valve owner, how would I go about this ghost cam business?
Okay, so I would suggest having it on a different tune, because usually what we end up doing is we create a lot more valve overlap on the Vanos tables at idle to allow that to happen. Now, on the B40, it's shit for fuel economy. In my opinion, doesn't sound great, but no, not particularly. I mean, I'm not super concerned about piston to valve contact or anything like that. Yeah, look, you can do it, and I can do it for you. That's fine. We have found that and this is not so much an issue now, but on early B48s, there wasn't enough tuning definitions available at the time to allow it to be successful enough. But anyway, that issue's been resolved now, so I'm not super concerned about it. Yes, it can be done. I don't know why, but yeah, it can be done.
So I think I would definitely, from a responsibility standpoint, I'd have to, straight pipe it and you just make it as obnoxious as possible.
Yeah.
Flames on that tune as well.
Oh yeah, but if you're running ethanol, this is the one thing that a lot of people seem to forget about. If you're running ethanol,
the flames,
you're pretty much not going to get burbles or flames, to be honest. The water content in ethanol is that high that it's ridiculously hard to get anything, and if you get something, just be happy you got something, to be honest.
Is there any way to, like, I don't know, cope with a resonator or something, where you can kind of get, like, a burst of back pressure, just kind of get, like, one larger flame rather than, like, spaced out purples?
I mean, yeah, obviously how your exhaust is designed does play into a lot of how the sound and the harmonics and just even how flames work, for example. But then there's also an element from a tune perspective. In saying that, though, there's only so much in the tune you can do. There's only so much fuel you can run. There's only so much ignition retard you can run to get a flame to happen. And obviously, the more aggressive you go on ignition retard to get a flame, you get to a point where it goes from being a flame to being damaging to the engine or surrounding parts. So you've just got to be careful in that mind.
Yeah, because I am still technically under warranty. So, I mean, I don't...
You're tuned.
Yeah,
there's no warranty.
Turbo seals, are they really... I mean, do I really need those? Excuse to get an IM450.
I mean, yeah, that's totally fine. But, yeah, if you want to go for a warranty claim, good luck. I had one customer went in for a warranty claim on some seals around his bearings, actually, in his turbo. And they said to him, even though he flashed back to stock, they go, your car's been flashed 154 times. We're not warranting anything. Yeah, they can see it. Like, even if I have a backup of my ECU and my 135, right? And if I was to go and take it in for warranty, which lapsed actually in April this year, and go, hey, there's an issue with the engine or even the gearbox, even though I have flashed it back to a clone of the ECU prior to any tuning at all, they will see in the DSC module, the body module, the instrument cluster, etc., they will see parameters in there like, oh, you had 30 psi boost pressure at this point in time, or you had this much mass airflow reading. Like, pretty certain, bro, that is tuned.
My electronic wastegate was having issues. It wouldn't open.
Yeah.
How'd that get there?
Honestly, I'd out the window.
Yeah. Alright, so I guess I'll go try that, and then I'll look into the close down stuff and straight copying it that way, because he's a classic of a Southern California BMW owner. Gotta play the part. Alright, man.
No worries. All good. Enjoy.
Alright, see you guys.
See you, mate. I'm not particularly sure how to do it on the phone. I've never been on a stage on a phone before. But you should be able to just hit the microphone button. It should let you in. Or actually, I can invite somebody. What is this going to? No, this is inviting other people. I'm sure BMW would have a heart attack, Roman. Just likewise, if I brought in an N20 with dart and sleeves in, I'm pretty sure they'd have a heart attack. Hey, Maddie, how you going? Oh, bye, Maddie. That was short-lived. I'm just going to jump back to the YouTube chat because I've totally forgotten about the YouTube chat. With regards to developing the N20 platform, I mean, I don't know how much of the live stream you have caught, Savin, if I'm saying that name right. But yes, development is still there. It's just a bit, I guess, slow in regards to what we're prioritizing and where we're at from a platform perspective. What we have now on the platform, I believe, is well further than what we've ever had on the platform. And it's still better than anything we've ever had. So for the majority of N20 customers, I think it's more than adequate. Is there more to come? Yeah, but like I said, there's a cost element, and on top of that, it's a worthwhile element. Like, if I make this part, is it going to sell? Is it going to make sense? Is it going to make the gains that we want it to? You know, is it going to be cost effective? That's the main thing. Would you pay $2,000 for 6 horsepower of increase? Probably not. I wouldn't. So let's just, is there development? Yes, I'm trying. Custom ROM for N20, I have looked into it. I have sort of gotten somewhere with it, but it's been a lot of trial and error, to be honest. When I say custom ROM, just custom firmware, map switching, flex fuel, that sort of stuff. It's been something, to be honest. The N20 does support factory flex fuel, but we don't know how non-Brazilian delivered cars will actually work with that, whether or not we have to do any extra work to the tune to make it work, or if we can just plug the sensor into the pin out on the ECU and it'll work. So I don't know. That's still happening. Just slowly. I'm one person stretched among 400 different things at the moment. It's getting a bit full on. You can join if you want, Maddie. I'm going to jump off in like 9 minutes, so you've got 9 minutes to jump in if you want to talk. That goes for anyone else if you want to jump in and talk. I know it's been a very long hour and a half now, so I can hear my kids in the background starting to lose their cool, so...
Yeah, so I got one question.
What's up?
So you were talking about how there's a pinout on the ECU for ethanol content. So you don't know if it's like already tuned in, and we just have to slam the sensor in.
Well, I've seen there's tables in the ECU for that reference flex fuel, but the thing that I haven't been able to get a conclusive answer out of yet, whether I look at the ECU logic diagrams and documents and pinouts and all that sort of shit, or even going through the ATL definitions, is the sensor enabled by default, or do we have to enable the sensor? And once the sensor is enabled, the logic flow in the ECU allows the other flex fuel tables that we've seen for years, do they then begin to work because of it? Don't know. That is something that we'd have to test. And on that note too, BMW have very specific sensor, so I don't believe any off-the-shelf like Continental flex fuel sensor, etc., would actually work. It probably would work if we could find the sensor settings in the tune to edit the sensor settings, but I don't know where those settings are. So far I haven't really found much around that, so we'll see.
Well, do we know what pins it pins out to? Or not yet?
I know what the pinout is, yeah. That's actually readily available. Off the top of my head, I think it's the third large connector on the ECU. I don't know if that's considered 6B or 6A or whatever it's called. And then I think it's pin 38 and 39, but I might be wrong. It's been a hot minute since I've looked at it. Oh, here we go. I'm going to invite you to speak. Does that work? Sorry, Maddie, I was referring to the other person in the chat that I can't see their full name for whatever reason, so...
Yeah, I think so. So I can... For me, I can straight up just enter the voice.
Yeah, but that's probably... Well, on the desktop, it's different. Number one, your rank is what allowed you to immediately join. Other people have to be invited, so they can request to join, and then I can accept them in, or they have to be invited in. But then on the mobile phone, I don't really know how that structure works. I've never used the mobile version of staging. I'm just going to jump quickly to the YouTube chat. Official Lopez. The boot mode sensor actually uses a Continental flex fuel sensor. Now, there's a few different aftermarket sensors out there, Continental being one of them, and it's typically the most commonly used flex fuel sensor. Boot mode used them on the N55, S55, B48, 58, etc., etc., etc. If you went and bought an N55 or S55 kit, and you went to go put it on the fuel pump hat, whatever you want to call it, near the tank, and try and plug it into the EKP module or the fem body module, depending on whose kit or tool you're using, it won't work, because what that does is all it's doing is patching in that sensor to the CAN bus system on the car. It's then up to the DME to read those CAN bus messages across the CAN bus network and then use that to change the tune or read ethanol content, etc. The reason why I specifically mentioned the N20 pinout is that the N20 has a direct pinout to the ECU for a flex fuel sensor, and that would allow for direct flex fuel communication to the ECU in a more OEM formatted setup. The, I guess, problem is, like I said, is that obviously understanding whether or not we can get it to work in the tune, but then another thing too is from what I've seen, the way that flex fuel N20 tuning is done is quite limited. It's actually more limited than what we have in terms of, say, boot mode, MHD, etc. offer for flex fuel tuning. So it means that whilst we could make a flex fuel tune, it's not that we're limited per se, it's just that we lose a bit of safety. And I'll give you an example. There's no separate ignition timing tables for flex fuel or non-flex fuel. It's one ignition timing table. What is specific with flex fuel, for example, is the load target table. So what that means is that you're relying on everything to be derived or limited by the load target table, right? So you would have to make sure that your torque request is whatever it needs to be for E85. And then you would rely on that load target table to scale back the load and then effectively the torque request for, let's say, E20, E10, or even zero ethanol, right? And that's all well and good, but then you have to then rely on the ignition timing table, its load value at that RPM axis, because it's a 3D table, to then line up with the load for the gasoline. And the problem you have here is just that you don't have, I guess, as a refined and as high definition system as possible. And the reason why I care about this is that it's an N20. It's not a B48. So we have to be very careful with what we do and don't do in that engine. And whilst we can obviously just have load structures in the ignition timing table for, say, 200 load and above is used for ethanol, and that's fine. It's just, from my point of view, I'd much rather have more hands available to create a structured and safe tune than having one hand on the wheel doing so. A lot of existing off-the-shelf maps, for example, will disable every other tuning method. When I say disable, they pretty much just raise the bar for torque request, load request to the maximum, and then they tune out of one table. Sure, that's easy, but then you get a tune that's not great overall for general drivability, for example. You don't get the same safety precautions that might exist in the ECU, for example, say scaling torque request back at higher ignition, at higher intake air temperatures, and that sort of thing. So it's sort of we could do it, but really want to err on the side of caution. So that's why I would prefer to look at, say custom firmware with custom flex fuel integration instead. I did try to invite you, M, to speak, but it don't know if it actually came through or not. Go for it. Ask away. Did it add benefit? Not particularly. So the reason why I say this is for two things. The factory B48, 46 head studs are an 11mm, studs, they're bolts rather. They're an 11mm bolt. We have not seen the head lift at 44 pound of boost. Okay? They've been incredibly reliable bolts. But the catch with these bolts, they're once off use and they're quite expensive to continually replace. So you jump to an ARP stud, which are reusable every time. Now, yes, technically the ARP studs are just a bit more stronger in regards to how much force they can hold. But for the majority of people, you won't see the benefit of them, really at all. The same with the main studs, same thing, they're actually quite good. The N20 suffered a bit, like we have seen the heads lift on the factory N20 head studs at about 31, 32 pound of boost. They're a 10mm stud on the corner, they're 11mm in the middle of the block, but on the corners they're 10mm, and they typically would actually end up failing, so benefit, not particularly. Let's wait for you to type your message. I think you'll be the last one for today too, before I jump off. Also, thick 1mm gasket put on the engine. What that ends up doing is just drops your compression slightly. And the reason why we normally suggest, say, if you're rebuilding an engine, you go with a 1mm head gasket is because you have to, when I say you have to, it's good practice to do it, is to machine the deck surface of the block and the head. When you do that, you remove material. So having a thicker head gasket makes up for that material to either maintain compression or drop compression. If you were to run a thinner head gasket, you would actually increase compression, usually. No, it doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of tuning either. Unless the compression was to change massively, let's say you went from 10 to 9.5, then yeah, it would. But if it went from, say, 10 to 9.9, it's negligible. Alrighty, pop your last 3 comments in, please, because this will be it, and I'm jumping off. Alright, probably the pump then. Talk to Kev and he'll help you out. Yeah, you'll find the drop in compression will be beneficial from a boost perspective. You may notice a slight decrease in transient response. But alrighty guys, on that note, I'm going to end it there. I hope you guys have a lovely evening and great rest of your weekend. Look, as always, drop questions, comments in Discord, Facebook, etc. I will see them. If I don't see them, Kev will see them and he will reply for me. Yes, we're not going anywhere, but hopefully we can have a bit more fun as we come into the future of 2024, etc. with the cars. So I'll see you guys later.